So in this lesson, we're going to be learning about printing. So what is this notion of printing? Well, if we look at the Python documentation, which is the written description of all of the different functions in Python, and we're going to touch on this notion of functions in a little bit as well, but let's get back to it. So what is printing? So from Python, printing is the use of a function called print that prints objects to the text stream file. Now, you're probably wondering what that even means, as you should. That's really cryptic, and it doesn't really explain what it does. So in layman's terms, print is what's called a function that displays text to the screen. That's it. That's all you need to know about print. We're going to look at how we can use it in just a second, but I want to touch on this idea of functions because it's really important. So what is a function? You're going to come to find out that functions are going to play a huge role in programming. In fact, pretty much everything you do is going to be handled by functions. And you're also going to write your own functions at one point. But let's just describe what a function is. So in programming, a function, it's a segment of code that carries out a specific task. Now, functions can have names. You can use these names to call these functions at any point within your code. These functions commonly, but don't always, take in inputs, and the function can use those inputs that you give it. It can process them, it can do math with them, it can compare them, it can do all sorts of stuff, and it can usually use those inputs to return a new value. But that's not always the case. Not every function returns a new value. So that's just the gist of functions. So let's get back to printing. So why do we need to know how to print values to the screen? Well, that's a great question. It allows us to display information to our users, and it gives our application kind of a sense of purpose. Granted, you wouldn't write a full-scale application in print statements because it's all in the command line, it's all in the terminal. It's quite boring. There's no pictures, there's no graphics, there's no user interface, it's just text. However, for the programming that we're going to be doing and the problems that we're going to be solving, it's going to let us know what's actually taking place within our application. If we wanted to build a social network, yeah, you'd probably want to use some sort of a web programming language, but that's way out of the scope of this lesson. So the last part is actually how can we use the information that we just learned? How can we actually print values? So this is the general syntax. So you have the name of the function, print, you have an open parenthesis, you have a quotation mark, you have the value you want to display to the screen, you have a closing parenthesis and a closing quotation mark. Again, just the general syntax. So you have your function name over here, print, and then over here you have the value you want to display. Now, another thing to note is that Python is syntax oriented, so you want to use exact syntax. For example, print. You can't have this P capitalized. If you do, Python is going to interpret that as something totally different. You have to have this parenthesis, you have to have this closing parenthesis. If you miss the opening quotation mark and have this one down here, it's going to get confused and it's not going to know what you mean. So you just really have to consider all of the syntax in this. So let's take a look at this in the editor. So we're here in our PyCharm workspace. So what we want to do now is we want to create a new file. So the way we're going to do that is we're just going to right click over on this folder. We're going to highlight new, and we're going to go to Python file. And you can call this, well, actually let's take a step back. So let's go ahead and create a new folder. So we're just going to right click. We're going to select new directory, and we're going to call this unit 1. Alright, and inside of this folder, we want to create a new, we can do this two ways. We can do a new file or a new Python file. I'm going to do new file. And I'm just going to call this lesson1.py. I'm just going to hit OK. So now over here we have our blank editor. This is where we're actually going to write all of the code. So let's go ahead and just start off simple and print our names. So I just type in the word print, and I want to point something out that's really useful, and it's going to help you a lot when you start programming more and you use more complex concepts. So you'll notice when I typed in the word print, this box popped up. This is called intelligent code completion. If I go ahead and hit enter, it's going to fill out this line of code for me. And then it's also going to pop up this new thing that has values, comma, sep, str equals, so on and so forth. Now, this is a list of all the parameters that this function can take. Parameters being just the values that I can give this function. And we're going to talk more about arguments and parameters more in depth later on. But for now, let's just go ahead and print our name. So we want open and close quotation marks, and in it I'm just going to put my name, Luigibattagli. I'm just going to save it, Control S or Command S depending on what computer you're on. I'm going to then go up and hit this little box up here. I'm going to edit my configurations. I'm going to hit New. We want Python and script path. I'm just going to locate it within this folder, Unit 1, Lesson 1. All right. And I'm just going to hit OK, and we'll run it. Oops. All right, and you can see when I run my program, it says Luigi Battaglioli as the output. And I'll just do another one just to show you an example. So we can say print, I really like Python. I'm going to save that, and I'm going to just rerun this configuration. And here you can see the output updates, and it says I really like Python. So go ahead, play around with it. You can print your name, you can print some stuff about you. Just play around with it and get to know it.